partners tonight at Third Place Books. It's a pleasure to welcome you to tonight's live-streamed conversation with Ambassador Capricia Marshall in conversation tonight with Thomas Corrigan. As we get underway, I want to acknowledge that our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, and particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continuing use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. And we thank you all for tuning in. Town Hall is grateful for the opportunity to invite Seattle audiences and beyond into present tense exchanges of ideas, issues, and creativity, even when we can't, do it in person. Town Hall will continue to produce online content throughout this fall and into the new year, and as circumstances allow, even host live streams from our building. Meanwhile, if Zoom or YouTube fatigue hasn't fully set in, many of our past talks are available in video or podcast form in our digital media library. But back to tonight's event. The conversation will run, actually I didn't check in, but generally you can expect about 40 or so minutes, followed by an opportunity for audience Q&A. The ambassador will take questions from the Ask a Question field at the bottom center of your screen. Please keep your questions concise so she can get to as many as possible. And also know that you can view the event both here on Crowdcast or over on our YouTube page if you want to utilize the closed captioning feature there. Town Hall is adding new events and podcasts every day. Upcoming programs include Michael Sandel with Anna Devere Smith about the myth of meritocracy, Michael Denzel Smith posing the question, what kind of country do we want to be? And Haley Tiathi discussing their Indigenous land acknowledgement art created specifically for an installation at Town Hall later this fall that I hope some of you will get to see sometime in the near future, as well as upcoming appearances by Senator Sherrod Brown, Michael Ian Black, Howard Gardner, the brilliant music critic Alex Ross in conversation with the equally brilliant music critic Ann Powers, Andrew Embry and Jen Psaki discussing 6 choices America can make in a turbulent world, and back-to-back nights later this week with the amazing Harvard historian and New Yorker writer Jill Lepore. You'll find plenty more about most of the above events already posted online at townhallseattle.org. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. Our Civics series is supported by the Real Networks Foundation, the True Brown Foundation, KUOW, and the Wincote Foundation Northwest. But as most of you know, Town Hall is fundamentally a member-supported organization, and I want to thank all of our members watching tonight's broadcast. I want to thank all of you for purchasing a ticket to tonight's event especially. Our programs were free in the spring, you may remember, but we've just introduced a small charge. The response to COVID-19 has posed unprecedented challenges to nonprofits, and if you support Town Hall's mission to make ideas and inspiration accessible to the whole community, we hope you will consider further support with a membership or by making a donation through the button at the bottom of your screen. I should mention that this isn't an easy time for booksellers either, and since we know you'll want to go deeper into the issues of the ambassador's book, I urge you to buy a copy of that book here tonight through our local and independent partners at Third Place Books using the button at the bottom of your screen, other than say later through other ways that you might be able to purchase that book. Go ahead and follow your impulse and do so tonight. All right, on to our program. Ambassador Capricia Marshall served as the White House Social Secretary in the Clinton administration from 1997 to 2001, and as United States Chief of Protocol in the Obama administration from 2009 to 2013. In her posts, she enhanced traditional protocol methods with new tools to build relationships between dignitaries and governmental leaders worldwide. She oversaw the diplomatic details of multiple state visits, the G20 and G8 convenings and summits, such as the Nuclear Security Summit, APEC, NATO, and Sunnyland summits. She's president of Global Engagement Strategies, LLC, which advises global organizations and companies on issues relating to the intersection of business and cultural diplomacy. A first-generation American herself, Capricia is currently an ambassador in residence at the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C. Thomas Corrigan worked with the ambassador at the State Department in 2013 and later at the Atlantic Council. A proud Seattleite now in exile in Arizona, he proved his bona fides by announcing in the green room that he's a big fan of both Town Hall and Third Place Books. Proof positive that diplomacy can, get you somewhere, I guess. Okay. Ambassador Marshall's first book, Protocol, The Power of Diplomacy and How to Make It Work for You, is the subject of their discussion. In a cultural and political moment when everything that previously signaled respect and collaboration among and within governments seems utterly upended, this feels like an urgent and important time to welcome Ambassador Capricia Marshall.
Thank you so much, Ray. That was a fantastic introduction and all very true. I'm so excited and grateful to be with the Town Hall audience tonight because it's given me the pleasure and education of so many hours of programming. And our guest tonight, Ambassador Marshall, gave me the great honor of working with her prior to my time in Seattle. So it's a perfect combination. And I'm so grateful that you're here tonight, Capricia.
Oh, well, it's such a pleasure to join you, Thomas, and thank you, Ware, for that wonderful introduction. Congratulations on all the great programming that Town Hall has been conducting, and certainly what a roster that is yet to come. I look forward to tonight's discussion.
Yes, and on that note, I wanted to echo Ware by saying that the book is available at the button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be speaking to a lot of it tonight. I have a few questions to start out, but want to welcome questions the whole time, all the time, using also a button at the bottom of your screen there. So we'll get to those questions later on in the hour, and I know they'll provide a lot of value to the discussion, as always. I wanted to start with the cover that's right behind you, Capricia, of this fantastic book, and the photo of you right there on greeting head of state at the South Portico of the White House. I think, I love the photo because it speaks to so much of what the Office of Protocol does, which is meeting people where they are, which I think is a great sentiment for the moment we're in as a country right now. For those who don't know, could you speak a little to how the protocol team does that for our country with leaders around the world, meet them where they are?
Well, again, I want to say thank you to you, Thomas, and particularly for tonight's moderating, but also for your years of friendship and support, and particularly when I was in the Office of Protocol. You were a profound influence on everything that we were doing. And also then thereafter at the Atlantic Council, working with you has enriched me. And Thomas, I will tell the audience, certainly had a bit to do on the development of this book. We collaborated on many aspects of it. So thank you, my dear friend. Well, the Office of Protocol is a busy office, and it is detailed with a variety of duties on behalf of the President of the United States. The Chief of Protocol is given the rank of ambassador. It is given the rank of ambassador because we stand in the position in lieu of the President. So we are there to act on behalf of the Office of the President when we greet chiefs of state and heads of government. One of my fondest duties was actually rushing out to Andrews Air Force Base and standing at the base of the steps when a leader arrived to our country and was preparing to meet with the President and our Secretary of State and delegations. And I extended my hand and welcomed that leader and stated, on behalf of President Obama, I welcome you to the United States. It always gave me a little bit of a tingle up my spine, but ever so important, because our duties in the Office of Protocol is to create that foundation so that diplomacy can take place. Protocol sets the wheels in motion for diplomacy, really creating a roadmap, if you will, for our leaders so that they can follow it in every discussion, every engagement that they have with their counterparts around the world, large or small. If it's a small bilateral, a one-on-one, or it's a large summit, Protocol is there to really set those meetings in place, put them in place, and then set them in motion. And people might say from the greetings that we had on the red carpet, like you see on the cover of my book, or outside the Oval Office, or at the base of a plane, is that really all that important? Is that really that significant? Well, it is, because it sets a tone. What we want is to create a mindset, if you will, in diplomacy, not only creating the physical structure, but we also want to create this atmosphere. And we want it to be welcoming and respectful to our counterparts, because our leaders are going to be engaging in some very difficult conversations and addressing some very important issues. So in a very broad sense, that is what the Office of Protocol was tasked with, or is tasked with, I should say, because it's still in existence. I mean, I could go into, if you wanted me to, Tom.
Yeah, well,
On.
There's so many photos that folks with us tonight probably see, in the media, in the newspaper, of those moments on the White House lawn or at the plane with the president. But there's so much more behind that, and I was wondering if you could go into a little bit of the planning, how, as you say, set the stage for diplomacy, what all goes into that kind of moment.
Well, it's a frenzied time. The moment that we receive word from the White House, it's through the National Security Council. Back in the old days, not that long ago, actually, they would send a fax literally over. And it would detail that the president was going to meet with a leader, or there would be a travel abroad, whatever the event. It triggered the Office of Protocol. We were then, we knew that we had to immediately begin our planning and preparation. And the team would start to put those details in place. And it's certainly a little bit easier to do when in the United States, because you have your surroundings of your office and support systems there. But when we traveled abroad, it was a little more difficult, and certainly we were challenged at times. And I will tell you that we were challenged when, in particular, I recall. Thomas knows that I love to tell a good story, and I certainly hope that you get the book, because there's some really great anecdotes in there. But when we were traveling to Toronto for a G20, there was a great deal at stake in the gathering of the G20 leaders, and the agenda was chock full. Bilaterals had been put in place for a long period of time, and again, like I stated, that the moment that we're tasked with the meeting, with the travel, the trip, we set in motion. There's a chief protocol officer that goes out ahead of us and begins to put many of the on the ground plans in place. And on this particular trip, I was very lucky to have with me a seasoned officer by the name of Tanya Turner, and she had headed off to Toronto. Now, what we like to have in protocol is quite a bit of opportunity for planning and preparation, so that our leaders then can follow that roadmap that I discussed earlier. But on many occasions, they throw at us a sort of a new opportunity, let's say that. So on this occasion, when we were in Toronto, there was a meeting that was put on the books quite late, and we had a very, very short turnaround with then Prime Minister of Turkey, Erdogan. And this meeting was given a great deal of importance. And so I turned to Tanya, I'm like, we got to go at it. So what we do is we have to find the room. We have to find space for these leaders to meet, and make sure that space is suitable for that meeting. Is it the right size? Does it so that if there is a larger delegation, would they fit? If it's you don't want it to be too big, because then the leaders get swallowed up in it. You're looking at the atmospherics of that space, and then once you get into the place, once you find a room, which took us a bit of time to do in this case, because there were 20 other global leaders staying in the same area, and certainly using the conference rooms that we were using. And so we had to hustle. We were lucky enough to find a space, but then we have to, what I finally refer to as rig the room. You have to put it together. And again, we had very little time, and so we had to run around the hotel and the conference space, literally stealing chairs out of hallways, borrowing, let's say, those chairs for this meeting, making sure that they were stable enough. Is the chair ample enough? Will it be, if it's photographed, is it appropriate? You want the leaders also feel comfortable in this time. I didn't know exactly how long the meeting would take place. This is a meeting that also entailed interpretation. So you knew that it would go lengthier because it is not simultaneous, it would be consecutive. So you have to double that time. And then down to the tables, down to the lighting, everything we think about and we put and bring together. So before the president walks into that room, the stage is set for this engagement. And we're really thinking about, again, whatever information I can glean from the National Security Council, we're thinking about what are they trying to achieve? What is my leader trying to achieve? And how might I also, and establish in this meeting, because it was by our invitation, how could I establish it so that I pivot the power a little bit, lean it in his favor as well? So the clock was ticking. Tanya and I got through, made sure that we also had tea and cups and cookies so that we can do some service as well. And from what we understood in the aftermath of that meeting and the readout, that everything went according to plan and they were quite pleased.
Yeah, you talk a lot about in the book, kind of discerning the working style between the US president and a leader in this kind of bilateral, the one-on-one engagement, as well as the US president's working style with, the host of world leaders that he encounters in his term. Could you speak a bit to how you discern, the president, in this case, President Obama's, maybe contrasting it with President Clinton's relationship and working style that he would have coming into a meeting like the Erdogan one or others, depending on the leader?
Sure. I had the great privilege of serving two, I consider, great presidents, both President Clinton and President Obama. And in those the roles that I served, I was social secretary, as we're noted, during the Clinton years, and then chief of protocol in the Obama years. The roles were very different, but the manner in which you serve, we all serve at the pleasure of the president when you're a political appointee, of which I was in both instances, is the same. And but I quickly learned, the sort of the differences, the nuances of each president, and what they do bring to the table, and those interesting qualities about each of them. I did find that when I speak of the mindset of diplomacy, both of them understood how incredibly important it was for them to have the importance of implementing empathy and humility. I was always taken aback at their capacity to put themselves into the place of whomever it might be, whether it was a leader from Tajikistan who was in awe of the moment that they had in that bilateral, or whether it was a young person on the staff who had just drafted remarks and was standing by, and that they wanted to really give them a sort of a bit of a cheer. So it was always interesting to me to see how they were capable of using these characteristics that were very authentic to themselves in their negotiations with global leaders, and humility. There was this wonderful moment between President Obama and President Clinton that I witnessed at President Obama's second convention, where President Clinton knew that he's sort of a big figure on the stage, and there was a moment where he was introducing President Obama to the stage, and when he came onto the stage, he gave a very deep bow. And the bow was so significant in so many ways it is an acknowledgement that from one leader to the other, you're doing a wonderful job. It is also, this is now your stage, and I am deferring that to you. I mean, just everything, the messaging was just extraordinary, and the kindness that was shared between the two of them. I mean, you could really sense it when they then hugged. It was really wonderful to watch. I also watched that interesting diplomatic spirit between President Obama and Secretary Clinton. There is a diplomatic dance, if you will, that would take place at the bilateral table between the two of them. I mean, it was just sort of a fantastic thing to witness, because their counterparts sometimes had no idea what was happening, because he would just sort of toss an issue over to her and she would say, well, yes, I understand, Mr. President, but shouldn't we think about treaty of XYZ when we're considering this? And oh, great point, Secretary Clinton. And they would just go back and forth. And it was phenomenal to watch, phenomenal in so many ways, because you recall their election was tough. They went after one another on some really hardcore issues. And for him then to seek out her counsel, invite her in to be a part of his cabinet, was just, I mean, nothing less than, as we say, Lincoln-esque, right? Because he was creating a team of rivals and wanted to bring in that opinion. So their collaboration, their power really then in negotiating and working with their counterparts around the world was the fact that their collaborative spirit was so strong. And it just was wonderful, really, to watch them. I think I may have veered off your question. I'm so sorry, Thomas. Once I get going, I just kind of...
No, I think that's a good segue, because I feel like they used that partnership to their advantage heading into a notable bilateral with Vladimir Putin in Mexico that you talk about in the book. So maybe you could speak to the detail of that.
Yes, I mean, when you talk about the setup of a room, this one was quite important. This was the first meeting between President Obama and President Putin, with President Putin as president. And I stood there in my dutiful spot, awaiting his arrival. Waiting. And he arrived late, mindset, click on his side of the ledger there. Finally, he arrived. And so I was escorting him to a room that we had really prepared well. Like I said, this was a very important meeting. Tensions were high. We were given a little bit of information by the NSC again about what was going to be on the agenda. And First and foremost was they really wanted to engage. They wanted to sort of push Putin into being responsive in this meeting and not sort of sit idly by and not address some of these issues. And so we sought out a room that was really small. We, made sure that we looked into the details of the table, the length of the table, what was on the table, all of those details we put in place. But then we also heard a little bit of news through some of the channels that President Putin was certainly hoping that Secretary Clinton would not attend this meeting. And that was because she had criticized his election, and he did not like that. And so when the moment came when I was escorting him, I greeted and then began to escort him down to the location and to do the introduction between he and President Obama. And President Obama, as you know, is very tall. So he was standing there, and in that, just as we're about to enter the room, he says, "Oh, and my Secretary of State," and sort of stepped aside, unveiling Secretary Clinton there, who had a broad smile on and an outreached hand. "Hello, Mr. President." And again, a little bit of mindset, diplomacy in action there. There was a ding. You could tell just a little bit of a hint in the eye of surprise, and so it was a wise move, I think, on President Obama's part. They go into the meeting takes place, and we understand that our preparation of that room really worked. That he was convinced into responding and being a collaborative counterpart in the conversation.
And do those details shift when it is someone like President Putin versus someone like the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom or the King of Jordan? Is it an adversary, if you will, versus close ally? I mean, do you scale back a bit in that kind of preparation for the meeting, or how do you adjust?
Well, each meeting really takes on its own characteristic. It does not necessarily depend upon the relationship, if you will, at the time between the United States and our counterpart, because there have been some tough discussions that have been held with the King of Jordan, His Majesty. There have been some pretty tough discussions on convincing our good friend over the pond to be a part of some diplomatic endeavors that we've had, and so even though we are allies and friends, we still need to think about what is our goal, what is our U.S. goal in these bilateral discussions, and what are we attempting to what are we attempting to move or motivate that counterpart to do in that discussion. And so each one takes on truly its own flavor, and it depends upon it. And a big piece of that business, as you know well, is where we're having those discussions. The Oval Office takes on great importance, but sometimes that's not the right place to begin a relationship.
Right. I mean, it makes me think of, you mentioned the transition from Dmitry Medvedev as president of Russia to Putin on the sidelines of the G8 in Mexico, that story you shared. I'm also thinking of the transition of Chinese leadership during President Obama's first term. And how did you discern the right way to work with a new foreign leader like President Xi of China when that transition occurred?
Well, yes, well noted, Thomas. These transitions are of the utmost importance. How do you continue the thread of the discussion? Will it continue, or will there be an upending? How does that relationship move forward? And the issues that you had left off when the relationship changed with the previous leader, will they continue on in that same manner? Lots of questions. And what protocol really helps helps our President and Secretary of State do is assist in that continuity, and then also really set the stage for them to establish this new relationship. Investing in those relationships is of the utmost importance in protocol, because we know that diplomacy is a long game. It's not going to be a short game, and in taking every opportunity that we possibly can, every tool in our toolbox, to invest in that relationship, because what we're trying to do is build bonds of trust. And once we build those bonds of trust, then we know that the engagements will certainly go in a way that is mutually beneficial between the two leaders. There's so many things that we did to invest in that relationship with President Xi Jinping, from when he first arrived as vice president on his first trip to the United States. We made sure that the schedule was one that made him feel very welcomed, and we addressed his previous relationship that he had with the United States. He had he had studied in Iowa, and right. So there was this moment that the team had brought him to Iowa, but also Vice President Biden, who was on board to host, then Vice President Xi, wanted to also make sure that that we included some activities that he knew he really liked. And one of those was basketball. He's a huge U.S. basketball fan. And so we brought him to a Lakers game when we went to Los Angeles. And, he had such a great time. In the suite where we were situated, we made sure that if anybody who is of great notoriety in basketball was visiting that suite and introducing him to everyone, well, he was really, really blown away. And that translated then into the first meeting that President Obama had with then President Xi. And that took place at Sunnylands. We decided we did not want this meeting to take place in the Oval Office. This was a get to know you. Let's take ourselves out of the formal atmosphere and the structure of the White House, and let's move it into a place where we can be a bit more informal and truly get to know one another, because we're going to have, again, some very difficult discussions ahead of us. And it was perfect. Sunnylands, as they call it, the Camp David of the West, the wonderful foundation grounds of former ambassador to the UK, Walter Annenberg and Lee Annenberg, just an extraordinary place in California. And they did have this opportunity. They went on long walks on the grounds. They sat in the incredible heat, the middle of June, took off their jackets, rolled up their sleeves, hence it was called the Shirt Sleeve Summit, and sitting knee to knee with one another, just had some conversations about, frankly, who each other were, what was important to one another. And I did feel sorry for the interpreters because they were sitting out in the heat and in the sun themselves, but the conversation was really fluid. It wasn't anything that was staged, as so oftentimes we can become accustomed to, and particularly with our Chinese counterparts. So it was a really interesting moment between President Obama and President Xi.
I love that mention of the Lakers game, because I think it demonstrates how many vehicles we have, as the United States, reaching out to other countries with the elements of our culture, be it basketball or in a very significant way that I know you worked on in food, and kind of harnessing the power of food, and it has a super big importance in diplomatic meetings, of course, but then there's the added element of bringing the U.S. flavor into our engagement. So I was wondering if you could share maybe with President Xi or another instance where food played a really big part in the engagement, because these folks are meeting for sometimes really long periods of time.
Yes, and sometimes we forget to feed them. Like I did with Prime Minister Netanyahu, who said to me, "Capricia, can I have a cookie?" And I was mortified, absolutely mortified. It's part of the reason why we launched the Culinary Partnerships Initiative. And I'll dial back a little bit. There was a bilateral luncheon that was taking place in the State Department, and it's my custom to sort of hang back after the food, the main course has been served, and just make sure that everything is flowing okay. And this was Secretary Clinton. And I had worked, as you well know, for the secretary for many, many years as social secretary previously in the Clinton administration. And so I knew her looks pretty well. Well, she looked down at her plate when the food was served, and then looked up at me, and then looked back down at it. And I realized immediately just then, we can do better. And so I went back to the office and sat down with the team, and we talked about these engagements that we really do have to use every opportunity, every tool that is at our disposal. And food huge opportunity that we were missing. And the chefs, everyone from the White House chef to the State Department chef to the Blair House chef, they were all so excited to become a part of this. So much so that we created the State Chef Corps, and we invited lots of other chefs to join us in this initiative, from Jose Andres to Ming Tsai of Blue Dragon. And you mentioned that with Vice President Xi, the meal that we served at the State Department was super important. I'll never forget this moment. When I was escorting Vice President Xi up and introducing him to Vice President Biden and to Secretary Clinton in the Monroe Room, standing there was also Ming. And Secretary Clinton introduced Ming and said, "Oh, we brought in this special chef for you." And of course, he knew exactly who he was, very famous chef. And his eyes just lit up. He was so excited. You went this extra length for me. You invited this person to create our meal, and the two of them just were going back and forth and speaking Mandarin very, very quickly with one another and learning a lot about one another. It was a wonderful moment. I mean, I think hours at the bilateral table could not have done what we did in that flash of a moment between Vice President Xi and Ming. And the food was unbelievable. It was just absolutely spectacular at that luncheon. But we did it again and again. We kept bringing chefs into the State Department. Chefs were going to the White House, talking about this fusion of our cultures. And, the United States is this great quilt of cultures all brought together. And so we could just add a little flavor from every one of our visitors. And it still felt very much like the Great American Experience.
Right. Yeah, that's such a great moment between Ming Tsai and President Xi. I want to get to a few. We've got some questions in the box here, which I'm excited we can get to. I guess I'll go first to Michelle. Asked, she loves the appendix of the book, which is great to hear.
Thank you.
Talking about gifts that President Obama gave then President Medvedev, but did he give any to Putin while you were chief of protocol? If so, what were they and why did you choose them? If not, what gift would you have recommended for reset era Putin? And what would you recommend for post-reset Putin if Biden is elected, and why? So there are a few questions there about gifts. I do remember a gift maybe for Putin, but there's a lot there.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
There's a lot there. I'm thinking, do you recall the gifts that were given by President Obama to President Putin or Medvedev?
Oh, well, I do. Well noted that I did talk about I talk about a couple of gifts with then president, when he was president, Medvedev, as opposed to prime minister. And only because they were sort of a broader issue, if you will. It was the getting to know you period, and also the way in which protocol officers, the manner in which we give gifts when it's protocol to protocol or leader to leader. Protocol to protocol is sort of behind the scenes, and leader to leader, it's a very big deal. And what we try to be is very forthright with one another and making sure that the other always knows when a leader wants to give a gift in person. And with President Medvedev on this one occasion at the New START treaty signing, he pulled a gift out of his pocket. Well, then President Obama, of course, looks to me and says, where's my gift? And I was like, this is supposed to be protocol to protocol, but you can't say that. That's not something that you say to the president. So the gift is actually held at the gate. It will be on its way shortly. He looks at me and goes, okay, Capricia, I know that's not the case. We'll be discussing this later. That's why, that was one of the reasons why I included those gift mentions about President Medvedev. Although I did also love the chain link fence that we got for President Medvedev. It was a beautiful, beautiful gift that just this small piece of the first Russian establishment in the U.S. And we were quite honored to receive that, so that we could gift it to President Medvedev. But President Putin is known to play, and I want to say karate, but that's not right.
Judo.
Yeah. Yes. And yes, was that the one that you were thinking of?
Yep.
Right? We got the belt, and the presentation of that, the preparation of that, all very, very important. And I guess thinking about how would I want to look at a gift in the future for President Biden. I'm not sure that they know one another very well, but they certainly are familiar with one another. And they certainly have met in their past. And so you have to take that into account. You don't want it to be it's good to meet you first gift, but you certainly don't want it to also be too familiar. What we did really well in the Office of Protocol and every one of our gifts, and we invested in a great deal of time. We did so because we researched the person, the relationship. We also looked into the issues that were going to be discussed. So what would be important for me to know is at that moment when President Biden, I guess, would be gifting President Putin is really to understand what issues are at hand. What are they? What is the president trying to achieve in this meeting? Also, gifts are a soft power tool, a very, very potent soft power tool. It can evoke an emotion. It can begin a relationship. It can do so much. And so the circumstances certainly are important surrounding the exchange, the bilateral meeting that will take place, like what it entails to determine what gift we then would select.
Has there ever been a moment where the gift has been that much more powerful of a tool during like a relationship reset, or to make a statement after a prior gift, or I don't know if you can.
that's
These
something
like
something there, Thomas. Certainly, yes. And in the book, I discuss a gift that was given to Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. And the first gift that was given to her did not go over so well and got some unwanted attention. And that is one thing you want to make sure that that gifts do not do. You do not want it to ever deviate from the work at hand. That's supposed to enhance the relationship and sort of be in the background, not be on the front page. And regrettably, this gift was. And so when President Obama was invited to Buckingham Palace for a state visit by Her Majesty, all eyes in the UK were on the U.S. And to find out what will those Americans bring for the Queen. And we knew there was a lot of pressure because, again, this is an incredibly important visit, not only with Her Majesty, but also with Prime Minister Cameron, lots of issues being discussed, trying to make this very special friendship a lot more special. And so we truly put in overtime hours in our research and finding the perfect gift. And also I'd like to say is that we do not select that gift. It is the president who makes the selection of the gift. We give several options. Of course, number one is the option that I want him to make. The first one suggested, and I strongly urge him to select the first one. On occasion, he might go to 2 or 3, rarely to 3, but maybe to 2. And on this occasion, we were very pleased that he selected the number 1 across the board. And we gave her a portfolio, knowing that she had, as great reverence for her father and the work that he did while he was serving their country. She collects everything. She's a great collector. Has an amazing archives, but also collected quite a few items about her father. And so we set about finding original menus and note cards and invitations, anything that we could find from her father's last visit to the United States, and presented it in a leather portfolio. And she was so taken aback by the gift when it was presented that I want to say that I think I may have seen a little tear in her eye when she looked up at President Obama to thank him for the gift. And then for Prince Philip, we knew that he liked to raise carriage ponies. And so we created an artisan from Ohio, and collaborated with an artisan in Colorado, and created bits and shanks for his carriage ponies. And on the ends, we soldered on the president's seal. Well, Her Majesty called Prince Philip over to take a look at it. He lifted them up and at first seemed quite pleased, but then seemed a bit disgruntled and was like, I'm not quite sure about these. And she said, oh, that's nonsense. And so she calls over this really tall guy who's like the head of the horses. He lifts them up and he's just like, oh, no, Your Majesty, this is fine workmanship, fine. And she looks at him and she goes, I told you, Philip. I was like, phew. Saves the day, because the president's looking at me like, uh-oh, Capricia, we may have hit a bump here. You were doing so well. I don't know. But no, they were then very, very well received. And then we gave Prince Charles, we created out of a tree that had fallen on the White House lawn, a magnolia tree, a box. And in that box, we had put seedlings from Monticello, and Mount Vernon and the White House, because he is an environmentalist. And in that, we put some White House honey. And he then said, oh, well, I have some honey. And then Prince Philip was like, oh, I have some honey. And then there was like a little bit of a honey off. But I tell you, Thomas, it was shortly thereafter that we got word that on the television, the anchors were saying, Americans get it right. Her Majesty very pleased with gifts. So it punctuated the relationship and enhanced the relationship, and then you move on. It's no longer being discussed. It's not in the news anymore. So it was incredibly effective.
Avoided the criticism of the vicious British press, which was
yes.
very important.
Yes, at all costs. Although we did have the oopsie doodle with the toast, and that the burnt toast headline the next day, that did not sit well.
And the toast at Buckingham Palace?
It was at Buckingham Palace. Now and the president is always amazing. He was always amazing at giving me my last moments of briefing, of where if there's one or two points, just to remind him from my memo or something we had discussed previously. Okay, Capricia, give it to me. He was not really listening. And so, Mrs. Obama, Michelle was like, Barack, you have to listen to Capricia. And I was describing for him the toast. So he said, okay, I'm focused. And in Buckingham Palace, they don't clink glasses. You raise your glass and you approach, or as I say, lift it forward and to make your toast. Now, what's key though, is that this has to be in alignment with this band that is about to play the national anthem, and they go off the cue of, and to Her Majesty the Queen. Well, regrettably, I did not read the president's toast in advance. He stated that line twice. Once almost at the end, and then of course at the end, which was supposed to give the cue. So almost at the end time, stated it, and the band began to play, but he had to continue on with his toast. It was like, it was definitely a bit of a cringe moment. And the press did pick up on that and talked about the burnt toast the next day.
Mm. Well, I want to go at Lisa and Candace actually both asked similar questions, which were kind of about the way protocol is conducted for the US versus other countries. So Lisa asked, is protocol universal? What are some of the differences between our protocol and other countries? And then Candace put in that, how robust are these diplomatic endeavors compared to other countries? And then Candace had a follow-up, but I'll let you start with that.
Well, I actually convened the first Chiefs of Protocol conference in the United States. I believe it was in 2011. And we had almost representation from every country around the world. It was an extraordinary convening. And at that conference, we discussed many of the issues that are many of the practices that slightly vary from one country to another, and saying that we did want to be on a similar page with each other. And so if there was ways in which we could tweak, of course, I want ours to stay the same and everybody to change and be us, but we had to make a few allowances as well. And but generally speaking, protocol is uniformly practiced the same around the world. Language understanding of is now, what is different is that it is adhered to quite strictly in some countries and not as much in others. And so it can be confusing. What protocol is supposed to do is, as I stated, creates that structure for our leaders. And so they are guided by it. And when that structure is not in place, accidents happen and moments that they certainly don't want to have on the global stage occur. And so we're trying to help them avoid that. And so I was one of those pushy chiefs that before we would travel, before we headed out, just making sure that I completely understood what was expected of my president. What was the arrival ceremony? What would it look like? And frankly, if I was not happy with the format and the manner, of which protocol was being conducted, I was forthright about that. Because I certainly want this to be a wonderful engagement between the two leaders, but my thoughts are first and foremost for my president and for the United States and how we are being represented. So I made sure that well before our president, often even arrived into the country, that we had a mutual understanding of what was going to take place. And then as well, many countries did the same here, sending advance people several weeks before, as protocol officers, several weeks, sometimes even months, if it was a state visit, in advance of their leaders, and walking through all of the preparations. We would sit down at a table, and from flowers to music to all of the logistics and steps, we really walk through all of those details. Protocol is about these micro details and the importance of them. People again always say, "Oh, does that matter? Does that matter?" Well, when you put that all together, it can have an incredible impact, a real major impact on that engagement. So yes, paying attention to those details, those nuances are really, really important. And so I reinforced it. I know many, many of my counterparts around the world would also reinforce that. And you almost can game out a little bit of who might not, and call them out on it. And we did, at some of the conferences and summits, we'd say, guys, come on, you've got to step up your game. Flags are not looking too great, whatever that might be.
Well, you mentioned the important work of advancing a trip. Candace's follow-up was actually about what does it signal to our diplomats when they observe that there's a change in the diplomatic efforts of new leadership in a country? So I assume that's U.S. diplomats on the ground during perhaps a visit by the president to that country, how they react to the advanced planning and in your work in advance of the president landing on the ground.
Are you saying like career diplomats, like foreign service diplomats who would stay?
Right, the foreign service diplomats at the embassy in, Beijing or London. How did they work with the Office of Protocol?
Oh, hand in hand. I always. I have great respect for our foreign service officers. They really are the thread. They and the career civil service officers are the continuity from administration to administration, and just making sure that things do not fall through the cracks, that the relationships are held together and convey to us a great deal of information when we arrive into the office about expectations. Also just, setting the stage, what has happened before in this relationship? How did it go? How did it not go? And, in each administration, everyone has their new ideas of how they want to do things. Many of these officers have been there for quite some time. Some of them 30, 40 years. And I certainly have been there, done that quite a few times, and making sure that we don't stumble down the road and making some of those oopsie doodles again. And so they're just extraordinary at making sure that there is a seamless transition between one administration to the next. And, they keep great records. So those get transferred over as well.
Right.
I hope I answered that right. Was that an answer to her question?
I think so, yeah. I have next from Anna. She asks about eligibility requirements for Chief of Protocol. For those in the audience who might...
You must be brilliant.
What do you recommend as experience for preparation for such a position?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Chief of Protocol is a political appointment by the President of the United States. I was quite lucky in the sense that President Obama, who did not know me at all, took the recommendation of Secretary Clinton, who put my name forward to President Obama as someone who would serve him well in this posting. And so he took a recommendation, and I was given the posting. Now, to prepare, I was quite lucky in that I had also served in a previous administration. So I would actually I would suggest that entering into government at an earlier phase in your life to really understand the lay of the land, the relationships, how the White House works with the State Department. That was really important. I think a really important element in my success as Chief of Protocol, because I could advise the president, who was new to the White House, had never served in the White House before. I knew quite a bit about those functionings and some of the tools and levers that were there at his disposal. And so I would advise people to, if anyone has an interest in going into government, to go in early, because there are extraordinary opportunities. You're given immense responsibility, even for those who've just graduated from college. I would say if you can get an internship, so very important. There's not many hands on deck, and so they give you a lot of responsibility quite early. And then if you are interested in staying on, you can either make your way through the career path, or you can become a part of a political campaign and hopefully catch the eye of that leader who then may give you the opportunity that I was given, the opportunity of a lifetime.
You mentioned mentorship a lot in your book, and of course, you are my mentor. So we know the importance of that. I wanted to go to Michelle here, and of course, this is kind of the last question in the queue. But if there are any additional ones, we do have a little bit of time left. Michelle was asking, She mentions Wendy Cutler, who worked on China's entry to the WTO, mentioned how the Chinese had designed one of their rooms to actually be somewhat uncomfortable for negotiators, awkwardly placing armchairs that were very uncomfortable, meetings with envoys that started at 10 p.m. When someone can't control or prepare their environment ahead of time, like you were often able to do for President Obama, what can they do to make engagement more comfortable for themselves and the team?
Oh, such a good question. Wow, such a good question. So the advantage that I felt that we had, even when we weren't in control of the environment, was that we were always given the courtesy of the visit, the sneak peek, if you will. Protocol officers gave one another that opportunity. And so you certainly can't ask them to completely change a setting, but some suggestions are oftentimes well received and taken to heart and made. So when it came to chairs in particular, I talk a lot about chairs in the book, and it was important because leaders would be sitting there for a very, very long time. If it's, for women, I had to think about Secretary Clinton. So oftentimes chairs were too high and her feet would be dangling. That's quite uncomfortable, or quite deep. Do we need an extra pillow? You really want to make sure that you're given that opportunity in advance to make some slight adjustments that would assist in the comfort level of the leader that you were serving. Now, if you're not given that opportunity to head in advance, then you have to have a pretty good relationship with your leader. And I was very lucky in the sense that I developed a great one with President Obama, and I had a long-term relationship with Secretary Clinton. So they knew that they could turn to me in the middle of a meeting and state, "This isn't working out for me," and then I could go to my counterpart, of which I spent a great deal of time developing relationships with. It was important for me to invest in those relationships, and particularly at these moments when you needed something very quickly for your leader, that they were able to accommodate you and help you. And equally, I would do the same in my country when asked. So, they always would, and this happened quite a bit in meetings, when things were not in accordance with the plan that they had hoped was in place. Just having that relationship with the person that you're working for is really, really important. I say that to a lot of folks who are also going into business, because this book really was designed to help people both in government, but also in business and in their individual lives. The relationship that someone might have with their C-suite executives, making sure that you work on those relationships, getting to know them, understanding their patterns, what are their likes and dislikes, watching the manner in which they do conduct business. Are they more formal, or are they less formal? And assisting then in accommodating them, not only in their own personal space, in their own C-suite executive room, but also when they leave that space and go elsewhere, that you can quickly make those changes when you know immediately this isn't going to quite work out for them.
Right. So important. I wondered if, I know we're almost at time, but to leave on a very hopeful note, hopeful for us, there's a great story that you have, Capricia, from that. I think the book obviously demonstrates the deep experience that you have across administrations, and there's a great story that I was wondering if you could share with everyone of the great, unique American transition of power, and how special that is to our country. And you have had an eyewitness to that, and I can say for myself, I hope it's a transition we'll be able to see very soon. But if you would.
Thank you, Thomas. This was an extraordinary moment for me to have witnessed, an historic moment. And I always felt as though I was actually walking in the footsteps of history, but this one really sort of stands out well above the others. The election of President Bush was not an easy one. There were quite a few issues that came up between he and then Vice President Gore, and particularly some hanging chads in Florida. And so this the inauguration of President-elect Bush was a tough one in the White House. It was very difficult. And there was, of course, a hope that we were going to move through this period with grace and dignity. And the day of, there are very few people who are actually in the White House at this moment. Myself, the president's chief of staff, and then, of course, the White House mansion staff, the butlers and ushers and the chefs. And so very few people, everyone else from the Clinton administration was asked to leave their offices the day before, clean them out completely. And so in the grand foyer on the main floor of the White House, I awaited and welcomed everyone from President-elect Bush's delegation, the Vice President-elect Cheney, the first and second ladies, their chief of staff, and very limited staff. And there's a wonderful tradition in our country where the outgoing president welcomes the incoming and hosts a very short tea in the blue room of the mansion. And so President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton hosted President-elect Bush and Mrs. Bush. I fondly recall very quickly the Clintons running from room to room, dancing. There was their favorite pianist was playing "It Had to Be You," and they were just really having a wonderful, wonderful afternoon, early morning rather, because this occurs at around 10:30 in the morning, and I had to go collect them because I said the motorcade has arrived. You must go and greet the president-elect. So President Clinton goes to the North Portico, greets him, escorts him and the delegation into the. It was not an easy day, in particularly for Vice President Gore and Mrs. Gore. They stood there and they honored the tradition, and I gave them just great points on that they were there, they showed up, and were a part of this ceremony. But then it became time for me to board the motorcade, and I began to escort everyone back out into their cars. And the last two left was President Clinton and President-elect Bush, and they stood there, their coats just put on their coats, and President Clinton buttoned up his and then looked at President-elect Bush and grabbed him by the shoulders and sort of adjusted his coat and then tapped him on the back, and he said, "Let's go do this." And then I saw President-elect Bush look back at him, didn't say a word, but he had this great look in his eye that said, "Don't worry, I've got this." And in that instant, in that moment, there was the transition of power in our country. No bloodshed, not a bad word spoken, seamlessly from one president to the next with completely different philosophies, moving our country forward. And I just will remember that moment for all my days, and just how incredibly powerful it is. And it reminds me how great it is to live in this country.
Such a special moment, simpler times, and we hope those moments proliferate as we move forward. But the book is Protocol, The Power of Diplomacy and How to Make It Work for You. It's third place books in Seattle and from independent booksellers all over the country. Thank you so much, Capricia, for joining us tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure as always, and I'm so grateful to Town Hall that we could do this.
Thank you, my dear friend. Thank you, Town Hall.
Oh, Candace may have had her internet cut out.
Oops.
Sorry, we're just having a minor audio issue. Give us 1 sec. Candace, you there?
Sorry, I could not turn my mic on, so I had to reload. But thank you both so much for speaking. And Capricia, I just really admire your passion for details. You know, as an event manager I think that you are sort of an event manager on like the highest level possible. And I just really appreciate that. So thank you so much for bringing your insights and your anecdotes. They're really interesting. And thank you for that final story. That is really powerful. And God willing, we will see that this year. Thank you all also so much for watching in the audience. If you want to follow Town Hall and get more updates on some of our content, you can do that by following this channel by clicking the follow button in the top right corner. Again, the book is available through Third Place Books, either on the YouTube page with the link or at the Crowdcast channel here by the book button. Use that, support our local independent bookstores in this time. Thank you both again so much, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.